All right, we're rolling.
Okay. I wanted to start in, one of the questions that you answered on the questionnaire really intrigued me, and that was that management program you
Yes.
learned in the Air Force.
Yes.
Can you give us some details about that?
Would love to. Cut me off when you've heard enough.
Okay.
In approximately 2007 or 8, the Air Force, to its credit, wanted to establish a program and to identify and eliminate waste in management. They brought in only reservists and only reservists with business experience. And they took two commercial ideas, which are called Lean and Six Sigma. And they said, we want you to marry those two, the best of both worlds, and come up with a product that works just for the Air Force. And that's what they did. Once they did that, then they found other reservists, and I was in this group, that they said they've got a business background and they can take these tools from this new hybrid program that they called Air Force Strategic Operations 21, AFSO 21, and implement them in the Air Force. So these Lean and Six Sigma, while they're not limited to for-profit, they were designed with for-profit in mind, but they have elements that work just as well in not-for-profit. So they identified, or they built this program, they brought people like me in, and they picked reservists because we have the most flexibility. If I'm a pilot, I've got to go fly, and doing this would be a side job. As a reservist, it was my primary job, really, because I'm only required to work 24 hours a day, but in 2009 I worked 100 days. I'm sorry, yeah, 24 days in a year. In 2009 I worked 100 days because I was out doing these cost-cutting programs. And it's a different way of looking at things. Coming down here today was a process. The process involved getting in the car, starting the car, putting it in reverse, so you can map out the entire process it took for me to get from my business to here. Once you identify the process, then you can start seeing where the waste was. And now in that scenario, there may not be any waste, but in publishing your newspaper, in TJ being assigned stories, there is a process that you have first to identify. Once you identify that process, now you can start looking for waste. And the waste can be in terms of it takes too much time. If it's redundant, that takes too much time. It could be money, that we're spending more money for this program than we should. One of the best programs we did, a T-43 is a Boeing 737 in the Air Force. And they said, we feel like we're spending too much time flying the T-43. We went into the squadron, we identified the process that they wanted us to look at, and we eliminated 4.5 occupied hours in a Boeing 737 per week and still met all the same training requirements. So that's a tremendous savings. 4.5 hours of, probably cost $12,500 an hour to fly that airplane, 4.5 hours every week of the pilot and the first officer, of all the crew, of all the instructors. So just a tremendous, in the $1 million savings range, and that process took us maybe 2 weeks.
Just using that tool to look at county government, and of course, like all governments, the lion's share of the expenses are in salaries. And I noticed particularly that process involved an analysis of manpower,
Yes.
time, just using that tool for a very broad sketch. Where do you see the savings?
I see the savings in any number of areas, but your manpower is a good point. And we try to tell people, we're not here to fire people. We're not here to, especially in the Air Force, it's easy, we can't fire you. You're in the Air Force. But in county government, although you could, that's really not what we're trying to accomplish. Because if we come in there and say, when we get through someone's getting fired, who's going to talk to us? Nobody. So we say, let's say that your department has 5 people, and we're going to make your department run with 4 people, then the 5th person is just going to move somewhere else. We're going to put them to use somewhere else, and over time, that person may phase out of their own volition, retire, move somewhere else. But again, we were always clear that we are not a, what would you call it, a right-sizing organization. We're not here to fire anybody, because then you're not going to talk to us. And we got to where people would call us and say, we know we have a problem, we need you to come help us. We would tell commanders, we're going to give you something back. We're going to give you money back. We're going to give you time back. And if you want to make that your employees get to leave at noon on Friday, that's your prerogative. You're the commander. You get to do as you wish. So people certainly is a big resource that we need to look at and see how we can create some efficiencies there. But also, there's a lot of money being spent that doesn't need to be spent. And that's another operation of efficiency that we can identify.
Let me, do you see any areas within county government, though, that appear to you to be maybe overstaffed? Maybe areas where where people could be moved to?
That's a difficult one. I think the quick answer is yes. But that's a difficult one because I'm not allowed to go sit at their workstation and talk to them and say, hey, how much of your time is spent doing this and how much of your time is spent on Facebook? Once I'm a county judge, I can do that. And that's one of the things that I'm really excited about, is being able to go in there and identify where these inefficiencies are occurring. And again, through this to me, it's real simple because it's just the kind of tools I use in my business. Identifying these processes, seeing how we can eliminate the waste, make things more efficient.
What were you in the Air Force? Were you in finance or?
No, I went in as a space operator. We controlled classified spy satellites. I did that for about 3.5 years. Then I transferred to officer training school where I was a flight commander. And I am the guy who is the barrier between a new college graduate and him being a second lieutenant. I did that for 3 years on active duty. Then I left active duty, moved back here, became a reservist, doing essentially the same job, but now I'm doing it for non-line officers, which are doctors, chaplains, nurses, attorneys, people who come in as a direct commission. And it was a world of difference because, as I would tell them, you can take a shot and be, you're still graduating. The Air Force doesn't want me to evaluate you, they want me to train you. That's all they want from me.
Are you still in the reserve?
No, sir, I retired in March. I could not, every January they called and said, we want you to do about 100 days this year. And every January I'd say, I can't. I'll do my 24 and I'll try to do 40 or 50. But every time they called and said, can you go here? I would say yes. So I told people, my daughter and the Air Force always said yes to whatever they asked for. And this year I knew I couldn't do that because if I was out of the county for 100 days, well, you can imagine this wouldn't be much of a campaign.
If I can add just on dovetailing that management program, obviously as the county judge and looking for those efficient, the inefficient areas and the like, you're dealing with multiple elected officials who have employees that while under the budget. How would you go, because that's a cultural change you would have to do, and how do you do that, particularly since you would have folks who are in opposing political parties and
Correct.
getting everyone on the same page? How would you manage it that way?
You're absolutely correct, and that is a challenge. And first of all, you do have a whole section over here does not fall under an elected except for the county judge. Mm-hmm. So now shifting over to the electeds, you have to get them to buy in on it, to tell them you're going to be able to get campaign points out of this if you intend to run for re-election, or there's going to be something else that you're going to get out of this. First of all, it's the right thing to do for the taxpayers. Second of all, I've got to get them to buy in because there's an upside for them. And that's no different than when we went into an Air Force squadron, we said, who are the people who can help us or hurt us? And we listed them all out. This is kind of one of the secret things we did. Okay, the people that can hurt us, what do we have to do to get them to buy in with us? Or at least be neutral. We can live with neutral. And that's what we need from electeds.
You've been critical of the bond issue. Take us through that. Would
The bond issue.
the county's bond issue?
Well, more specifically, the county debt and the certificates of obligation. Yes.
Make that distinction for me. What is it about I understand the level of debt is a concern, but were there any projects that you thought were unjustified other than, I think, the scope of the Justice Center is one you mentioned?
That's correct. That puts me in a slight disadvantage because I can't go back 16 years and have a complete knowledge of everything that's happened in the last 16 years. The bonds, I do understand that the county has to assume some debt. I just think that our debt is far too high and it's gotten there rapidly. And that's of great concern to me. I think the bigger point that I get real concerned with is the certificates of obligation that are not voted on by taxpayers. In fact, the process to stop a certificate of obligation, to me, it's impossible to comply with. You have to have so many people that know about it. They have to get involved early on, and it can be done so quickly. I just don't see how you stop a certificate of obligation. And yes, the scope of the Justice Center and the location of the Justice Center is, I think I answered one of my questions there. The growth is rapid in North County, and they need a facility up there. And I would like to be able to turn the clock back, but we can't, and say, let's talk about a smaller facility here and a larger facility where the majority of the population growth is.